In 2008, the country was at a breaking point. Americans were being told that the current leadership had failed, leaving the nation vulnerable and economically distressed.
Small business needs tax relief.
What we need to do now is to put more money in the pockets of workers.
The economy is badly damaged.
Problem is we give tax breaks to companies that, like Exxon, that are making gazillions of dollars.
I believe a new kind of politics is possible.
But less than a year into Obama's presidency, many Americans began to feel betrayed. Americans were under assault from the establishment, and they didn't know where to turn. They began to project their desire for unity, looking for signs there were others like them, others who felt the same despair about the direction their nation was headed.
Says no more taxes! Says no more taxes!
We are here to give a message to Congress and the President that we are tired of them spending our money and not listening to our views.
I can't sit down while something this drastically harmful to our country is going on.
And as if to validate the very need for a citizens' revolt, the establishment responded by alienating, undermining, and attacking their own voters.
We call it AstroTurf. It's not really a grassroots movement. It's AstroTurf by some of the wealthy.
The very one who promised change embraced the establishment.
You see folks waving tea bags around.
Was he guilty of miscommunication or intentional deception? Hi, I'm Bishop E.W. Jackson. In January 1776, Peter Muhlenberg stood before his congregation and said, "I am a clergyman, but I hold my freedom as dear as any man." Over 200 years later, I stand before you as a clergyman, and I believe that our freedom is threatened. Please consider carefully what you are about to see. The ill-defined change he promised sounded treacherous to an increasing number of wary Americans. Was he guilty of miscommunication or intentional deception? Many believe that Obama cleverly disguised his real agenda behind a facade of platitudes and positioning himself as an outside the establishment reformer. If so, it was a porous facade. Even during the campaign, he revealed schemes that had been discredited thoroughly in other parts of the world.
Your new tax plan is going to tax me more, isn't it?
And I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody.
The phrase "spread the wealth around" may seem harmless to some. To others, it was a clear invitation to adopt the destructive ideology of leftist revolutionaries. Among the public and from the media, it should have ignited debate over Obama's intentions, like whose wealth is to be spread around, and who would be the beneficiaries of the money Obama planned to confiscate. It wasn't the only time Obama displayed tendencies that some labeled socialist. A public radio interview in 2001 features in-depth details about his regard for the U.S. Constitution.
Generally, the Constitution is a charter of negative liberties, says what the states can't do to you, says what the federal government can't do to you, but it doesn't say what the federal government or the state government must do on your behalf.
These sentiments should have been revealed and widely panned by the mainstream media, which in turn should have demanded that Obama explain how exactly he intended to govern outside the bounds of the Constitution, but no such scrutiny was forthcoming. Obama was allowed to ride a bad economy that he continually derided in the most exaggerated terms, always blaming George W. Bush and capitalism, all the way to the most powerful position on earth. Contributing factors included a fluke of the housing bubble caused by government management of sectors in the home mortgage industry that spawned the financial crisis. In other words, it was the progressive policies of the liberal Democrats, the very ideas that Obama supported and embraced, that caused the crisis that put him in power.
We need a strong, world-class regulatory agency to oversee the prudential operations of the GSEs.
But in 2005, Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan added his voice on Fannie and Freddie, quote, enabling these institutions to increase in size, and they will once the crisis in their judgment passes. We are placing the total financial system of the future at a substantial risk. Senator John McCain co-sponsored legislation. Quote, for years I have been concerned about the regulatory structure that governs Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And the sheer magnitude of these companies and the role they play in the housing market, the GSEs need to be reformed without delay.
It is indeed a very troubling report, but it is a report of extraordinary importance, not only to those who wish to own a home, but as to the taxpayers of this country who would pay the cost of the cleanup of an enterprise failure.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two government-run entities at the core of the financial crisis, had been abused by the Clinton administration as political instruments. They transferred large amounts of wealth to other Democrats, like Franklin Raines, former Clinton budget director, and Jamie Gorelick, former Clinton assistant attorney general. They received millions of dollars in ill-gotten bonuses, while elected officials ignored their oversight responsibilities.
Through nearly a dozen hearings where, frankly, we were trying to fix something that wasn't broke. Mr. Chairman, we do not have a crisis at Freddie Mac, and in particular at Fannie Mae, under the outstanding leadership of Mr. Frank Raines.
And when some spoke up about it, they were attacked.
Speaking personally, I think there are a lot of very rich people out there whom we can tax. You seem to be saying, well, these are in areas which could raise safety and soundness problems. I don't see anything in your report that raises safety and soundness problems, but I have seen nothing in here that suggests that the safety and soundness are at issue, and I think it serves us badly to raise safety and soundness as a kind of a general shibboleth when it does not seem to me to be an issue.
The notion that a government agency, rather than a private lending institution, can better decide who is eligible for a home mortgage is a very progressive idea. And in the case of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, it led to widespread government corruption and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. But once elected president, instead of reforming the progressive policies that had brought disaster on the U.S. economy, Obama began expanding them. He used government loans to trouble corporations like General Motors and Chrysler as levers of control over enormous segments of the private economy. But he continued to deny the obvious.
So today, the president unveils sweeping changes, and they do come with strings attached as a condition for receiving more aid.
And that's going to mean a set of sacrifices from all parties involved. Management, labor, shareholders, creditors, suppliers, dealers. Everybody's going to have to come to the table.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste.
The collapse of Fannie and Freddie, which caused the entire home mortgage industry crisis, was the direct result of the government trying to run private industry. This had been widely forecast and loudly decried as a dangerous precedent and a threat to the free market economy. One of the dangers of government influence and control over private resources and assets is the potential for a slide into a spoil system, where assets taken over by the government are then reallocated to the political supporters of the regime in charge. This not only presents a drastic conflict of interest for Obama, Majority Leader Reid, and Speaker Pelosi, but puts them in the position of selecting the winners and the losers in what used to be the free market. Such was the case with IndyMac Bank.